Get ready to rumble!
So hello there, welcome to this video. You wanted to know a bit about how I go about, or how you can go about writing drums in Guitar Pro, and I'm going to show you the way I do it. Basically, what I've gone ahead and done here is find a very simple drum groove in 4/4, one that is probably the very first one you learn as a drummer. Now, I'm not a drummer, but I've played a wee bit of drums, not much, but I know my way around drum notation though, because I've been writing in Guitar Pro for so long and looked at a few drum sheet music. So basically what we have here is the kick drum on the G, and it doesn't matter that it's on the G, just remember that it's at the bottom here. That's going to be the most simple way to remember it. It's at the bottom, the lowest note you get. And then you have the snare in the middle here on the second beat. You have the kick drum on the third beat, and you have the snare again on the fourth beat. And that's a very simple pattern that you learn right away. So usually it's very often very typical that you have the kick drum on the first beat, and then you have a snare on the second beat as well as it. And then you have the hi-hats as well going in eighth notes above that. And that's a very simple way that we can replicate this in Guitar Pro. And I'm going to go ahead and show you that. So let's close this window and go into Guitar Pro. And what you want to do is create a percussion track. You can do that either by going into track menu and selecting add, or what I like to do is choose this icon that says add a track up here. It's a small icon with a plus. Once you've done that, you can go ahead and choose percussion. Say OK, and OK again. You can name the track if you want. I'm going to just let it be percussion. And once you've done that, you've got a percussion track. And what I'd like to go ahead and show you now is that up here, there are three icons. One that says keyboard, it shows you a keyboard on top. One that says fretboard, shows you a fretboard like on a guitar, and there's one that says percussion. Now, do you remember the note we needed for the beat we had before? Let's check it again. There we go. We needed a kick drum, we needed a snare drum, and we needed a hi-hat. That's typical the way you write a hi-hat. It's like an X on top of the lines here. So let's close this again and go into Guitar Pro. It was a kick drum. Let's find a kick drum. There are two kick drums, or two bass drums if you want. One says 35, the other says 36. It's a personal preference, whichever you prefer and can remember. For some reason I remember 36 the best. And then we need a snare, which is 38 or 40. I prefer using 40. Again, it's just a personal preference. It's a bit of a sound difference, but it's basically the same note. It doesn't show up as a different note. And then we need a hi-hat, which is 42. So also, if you go ahead and look at all these icons down here, not icons, but notes, you can see they are clickable. And if you click, say this one, which we had in the notation before, it shows up in the tablature as well, and it shows up on the notation sheet music up here. But in the tablature it says 42, so let's remember that hi-hat is 42. Okay, and we need a bass drum. I'll go ahead and use 36. And we need a snare drum, which is 40. So you can leave this open if you want, but I'm going to close it now because I can remember these 36, 40, and 42. Those are the things we need to replicate the drum beat we had before. Now, one thing that I like to do is look at these three icons up here. That one is sort of grayed out. It's not grayed out as such, but it just tells you that there are the possibility to have voices layering as such, and you can use voice 1, which is the upper voice. It's not as such as a register, but it's how the notes are presented in the sheets. So, and there's a voice 2, which is sort of bass or lower. So let's go ahead and choose voice 2, which is the bass, because we are gonna separate the notes a bit to make it look nice in Guitar Pro. Do you remember what number it was? I think it was 36 that gave us the kick drum. Let's try and write 36. That's it, you got a kick drum. Now let's try and add a snare drum next to it. I usually use the arrows to move around in Guitar Pro. So I move one to the right, and then you can write the snare drum anywhere you want on these. You can write it, remember that it was 40, you can write it down here, but I like to write it like in the middle, because it's kind of similar to where it ends up in the sheet above. So either on the 4th here or the 3rd string as such in the tablature. So I'll go ahead and write it here. Now we have a snare, we have a kick and a snare. Let's add another kick and another snare. Now we have the replication. I've replicated this bottom part of the sheet music here. We have the kick drum and the snare drum, the kick drum and the snare drum. Let's go ahead and add the upper part, which is the hi-hat. So we close this window again, and we go into Guitar Pro, and we choose the voice 1, which allows us to write anything up here that doesn't interfere with what we've written below. That's very clever when writing drum parts. So remember what number it was for the hi-hat? Well, it was 42. Let's add a 42, and we wanted 8th note, so you go up here and choose 8th note, and you can write that all the way to the end here. So now if you look up here, you have exactly the same sheet music as you had in this one here. Of course you have the repeating bars, we can add that as well. Let's add the repeating bars. Let's say 8, and we can add it here. So now you have exactly these the same up here as before, as in the other window. See? Very clever. Now let's go ahead and try and play it just to hear what it sounds like. It's at 120 beats per minute. It sounds like this. Let me just close my microphone. So apparently I haven't turned on the line and input of my sound, but it doesn't really matter. I think you can hear me anyway. The only thing you couldn't hear was that when I'm typing in the drum parts here, you're gonna get the sound played as well. So 36, let me replicate it again, 36, 40, you get it. It plays a sound. So now we've created our first beat here. What you can go ahead and do is look at any beat that you like in, like this is a very simple beat. If we go back, you can see there are many varieties of beats. There's this one, for instance. Let's try and replicate that. So that's kick drum on the first beat, snare drum, kick drum, snare drum, and the kick drum comes in an 8th note after the snare drum. So let's go into Guitar Pro and replicate that for the next part. Let's delete these repeat bars. So on the upper note, we had the hi-hat still going, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and below that we have the kick drum on the first, had the snare on the second, and then we had a kick drum right after, on the 8th note right after, and we had a kick drum again on the note after that, and we have the snare drum here. So let's go ahead and listen to this. So that's a different pattern, a different drum pattern. It's a very simple drum pattern as well. You can also have one that goes like this, which is also very simple. 4th note, quarter note, then 2 8th note, and a quarter note, which is sounding like this. So there are many different ways to write a drum beat, but I think the easiest way is simply to go into Google and Google maybe drum groove, a notation sheet, let's say sheet music. Now you get quite a few advanced ones, but maybe if we search for beginner, yeah, well, you can actually go ahead and also drum sheet beginner. Oh, this is, yeah, this gives you lots of different results. Maybe you find some song that you like and you can look at the sheet music for that. You can replicate those drums. That's basically how I learned to program drums. So now that you've got these drums in Guitar Pro, we can go ahead and maybe add some more parts. You just notice here we have a lot of different things we can add. Let's, in the beginning, it's very typical to have like a crash or a splash or something like indicating you're on the first beat. So let's find a crash, which is either 49, I see, or 57. So let's add that on the first beat of the first measure. So instead of 42, we simply write 57. Oops, sorry, I'm on the wrong voice here. You need to be sure you're on the correct voice in the upper voice here. So I was on the lower voice because I was editing the bass drum before, the kick drum and the snare drum. So upper voice, and instead of 42, choose 57. So now you have like an indication that you're on the first beat. Let's put in some repeat signs here. Sorry about that, guys. So let's play that now, and let's listen to it. Alright, so that's basically one way to write drum grooves in Guitar Pro. Of course, you can add any guitar above that you want on the guitar notation. Let's just let's add something. So we have this, so just do something quickly here. It's nothing fancy. So that's one way to go about it, and I hope you learn a thing or two from this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you around.